Do you have any fears now at your stage in life, or is anything that's sort of thrown at you? Like you've been, from what I understand, you like from a business perspective, you've been through, you're an events company, and your whole business pretty much closed down for an undefinable time, and that in itself was probably a massive challenge for you, and the responsibility of a lot of people that you had to sort of deal with. But is there anything now at your stage that you feel is still, you're a bit intimidated by it all?
I'm just like everybody else trying to survive every day. No doubt about it. COVID killed our business, and we're fighting our way out of it. But every day is a challenge. What if I screw up with the kids? What if I'm wrong about all this? What if kids are supposed to sleep in late and eat lollipops? Um, I'm worried about everything, but I don't really let it get to me. I immediately shake it off. I understand that our brains are, wired for 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And so I actually named my brain, right? You name your brain and then you have a conversation, not because I'm mentally ill or anything, but I have a conversation with the brain and say, hey, why are we going through that again? We already discussed that this morning. We already
I love
resolved
that.
that. We resolved that issue already, right? We're not going to get eaten by a shark today. We discussed it. Stop complaining. Um, so that's another tactic you could use, because otherwise you go into these loops where your brain just keeps bringing up the same damn issue over and over and over throughout the day, and it's a waste of energy and a waste of time. You wouldn't let a friend do that, right?
Yeah,
You could do it.
that's a great point, and that's one of the things I was going to talk about, because these sort of thoughts in your head. I'm sure we've all had them, and my guess is you have as well, where you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly this thing hits you, and you go into panic, and it's like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it always seems much worse at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I've tried, particularly through the pandemic, to find ways of not allowing it to get control of me. And I've even listened to people where they've said, look, those are just thoughts, and they're not you, and just watch them, but observe them, but don't allow them to bring you in. So have you found any coping mechanisms? Because certainly, I suppose, even outside of business, your sort of endurance pursuits, where you've done, I've got it written down here somewhere, but you've done a ridiculous amount sort of competitions back to back, and just going through that must have caused you to question, should I be doing this? Am I injured? Is this right? So how have you had some other coping mechanisms to manage those thoughts in your brain?
A couple of great ones. I have a buddy of mine. I did a podcast with him. You could look it up. His name is Elia. He's a Greek, and I think he's a reincarnation of like some Stoic from way back when, one of the philosophers, because he likes to call me at like 6 in the morning, and he's got some new philosophy. But regarding coping mechanisms, one of the ones he came up with, and we were talking about, was the pressure and the fear associated with the event or the day or something like you were just mentioning, is usually associated with your fear of losing everything up to this point. So let's say you were a wrestler, and let's say you've won the last 50 competitions, and now you're about to go on the mat again, and you're sweating and you're nervous as hell. If you could quickly realize that the previous 50 events are not on the line, you've already won those, right? You've earned your stripes there. The only thing on the line is 51. No big deal, win or lose, right? It doesn't wipe out everything you've done up until this point. So I think that's one great coping mechanism.
Mm.
Another great coping mechanism is you can quit. You can walk off the mat. That is an option. Simone Biles walked off the mat in the middle of the Olympics with the entire world watching. She's dusting off. She's getting back in the game. No matter what you think, whether that was a good idea or a bad idea, it's an option. So like, if just knowing that you have a ripcord that you could pull should give you a little rest and relaxation. You could always quit. And by the way, just telling yourself it's okay to quit usually will get you going and get you through it and get you back in the game. But it's not like, there's a gun pointed at you and you're in a room that you can't escape from. There's a way out. And then thirdly, I like this idea of just, it could be worse. You're up at 2 a.m., like you said, you're sweating bullets. You don't know if this thing is going to happen tomorrow or not going to happen. Oh my God. You're not living in Siberia. You're not in an ice cold shower right now. You're not missing 2 arms and a leg. It's not 1927 in the middle of the Great Depression where it's not that fucking bad ever.
Yeah, I like the bit that you said where it's like, look, you've got the 50 under your belt, and it's all about the 51. But I kind of sense that in a lot of cases we don't typically think that way. Probably because this guy actually mentioned it as an item, and when you think about it that way, it does make you feel a little bit different about those past achievements. But how do you wrestle with that then, in terms of accepting, I've actually won the 50, and by losing this 51, I'm not going to, it's not going to change my life going forward. But I suppose the temptation, whatever you've achieved, whether it's in business or in sport, that it seems instinctively that when you lose, it almost undoes everything that came before that.
Yeah, and I think you really need to be cerebral around that and really study it, because that's a ridiculous way of looking at it, but that's the way we all look at it. That's why we put so much pressure on ourselves. But if you're a business person, you've had an incredible career, there's going to be a moment probably late in the game where something bad happens, because the longer you play the game, the more likely something bad's going to happen. And so you got to rack up those wins. Remember, nobody could take those from you, and just accept the fact that there's going to come a day when you're not as sharp, you're not as good, not as fast, and you're going to lose one. And that's just the way it rolls. That's the price you pay from all the good you did prior to that. So I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's a great coping mechanism.
In terms of failure, how do you train yourself to get used to it, accept it, encourage it, in order, because as you say, those failures for anyone that's successful are going to be inevitable, but it's always, sometimes when it happens, depending on how you define it, but when you're not actually achieving what you want, or you feel that you've failed in some way, how do you prevent that from sort of, being comfortable with it?
Well, let's just say, I just thought of this as you were talking. Let's just say you were a ski jumper, and you're on a freestyle team, and you go, 30 feet in the air, and you do flips and twists and all this stuff. Let's just say that was your sport. That's what you do for a living. Is it realistic to think that every time I go out there and try a new trick, I'm going to land it perfectly? It's impossible. You just have to accept that I got to do this 40 times, 50 times before I nail it, which means I'm going to fail 49 times before I get it right. And it's really just a learning process. So when you think of it in terms of ski jumping, or, you go down the list of is it really possible to think that you're going to come up with a new product or service, raise a bunch of money, start a business, and right out of the gate, it's going to be wildly successful. The whole world's going to buy your product, and you're going to buy a Lamborghini and ride off into the sunset? No, you're going to make about 5,000 mistakes. And then after you've made your final mistake and you finally figured it out, the competitor shows up across the street and steals half your employees. And then when that's done, and you finally hire some new employees, you're going to run out of payroll. And then when that's solved, COVID hits. That's just the deal. A great author, he wrote Gates of Fire. I had him on the podcast, and he said to me, he said, Joe, every day when I write, it's very hard to be a writer. It's a white blank piece of paper, or in the case of if I'm typing on a computer, it's a white screen, and I'm facing resistance every single day, failure. failure that I might not be able to put the words on the paper. I can't come up with something. He said, the sooner I realized that that's just the deal, that 365 days a year, for as long as I'm on the planet, I'm going to face resistance. Once I realized that, once I accept it, life became a lot easier. So failure is just part of the process. His name is Stephen Pressfield, by the way.